proprioception, which is, of course, a different type of sensory systems. We will have to look into, first of all, the muscles. And here we have muscle spindles, which are responsible for processing stretch of the muscles. So whenever you stretch the muscle, you will see that responses from the muscle spindles increase. On the other hand, if you put tension on the muscle, so you, for instance, put a weight in the hand, and then you can measure from the Golgi tendon organs, and you will then be able to see that, well, the more tension there is on the muscle, the more these will fire. And here you can see which types of fibers that projects the various types of proprioceptive signals. So we have the muscles, primary spindles and secondary spindles, the Golgi tendon organs. Then there is also sensation from the movement of the skin, which is related to the sensation of proprioception. So how the body is positioned and how much it's moving. And you'll see that it's mainly the 1A and the 1B, which are the large diameter, especially the 1A are the large diameter proprioceptive signals. And again, you will see that it's actually the same pathway as for touch going up to the primary somatosensory cortex, but compared to the skin, you will see that it's primarily for proprioception area 3A and 2 that receives signals, whereas from the skin it's mainly 3B and 1 that receives the signals. But most of the signals, of course, is first of all directed towards these 3A and 3B. One small peculiar thing that we may even be able to try at one point is the ability to actually trigger or to trick the proprioceptive system to actually work in a wrong way. So these are some experiments done back in the 70s where some researchers put vibrators on the muscle tendons. And if you do that, you get a wrong signal back from the muscle tendons, which makes you incapable of being able to see or at least feel where your muscles are or where your joints are located in space. So here you see the trace of, you have one arm that's vibrated and one arm which is used as a measure, so you have to track the one arm that's vibrated, and you will see that that if you do that, you're not able, if you vibrate one arm and you have to track with the other arm, you're not able to, when you turn on the vibrator here, so you put a vibrator here on the muscle tendon, you will actually not be able to track the vibrated arm very precisely. So of course this is done with blindfolded, so you cannot see, so you only have to rely on your proprioceptive sense, whereas if you don't get the vibration, well then you will actually be able to do it quite precisely. So you can actually fool people to think that their arms is located in a different position, and you will actually also be able to experience illusory sensations of movement if you do this. Ja.
Skal det være på dansk eller engelsk?
Bare på dansk, det er fint.
Hvad var teksten lidt tæt på pilen? Det er lidt svært at se.
Jeg tror, der står movement resistance. Gør lige prøve. Movement resisted. Okay. So the sense of temperature is of course also a sensation which is related to the skin. And in the skin there are different thermal receptors. Some are able to process cool sensations, other warm sensations. Then there are the heat nociceptors and the cold nociceptors. So that is receptors which are responsible for the more painful perception of heat or the painful perception of cold. And you will be able to find actually which types of channels in the receptors that are responsible for these different perceptions. So you can see here how their response curves are at different temperatures, the different types of channels. So you will have something that's responsible for processing heat sensations and other for cold sensations at very low temperatures. If we look at the pathways for temperature, again you will have the incoming signal from the dorsal horns, and then if you go to the here to the spinal cord and look at the blue parts, which are the ascending, so that's signals going from the periphery up to the central part of the brain, you will see that it's particularly these spinal thalamic tracts down here which projects the sensation of temperature. And if we go up to the thalamus, when we just looked at touch, well then it was mainly this nucleus here of the thalamus, the ventral posterior lateral nucleus, that processed touch. But when we go to temperature, you will actually see that a lot of other nuclei, both the ventral posterior medial and also these intrathalamic nuclei here, which are located in this Y-shaped band here, they also process temperature. And they process it out to the respective parts of the cortex which process temperature. So, of course, the primary somatosensory cortex is also involved here, but also parts of what's called Baldwin area 26 is involved. Pain, again, we have different types of nociceptors in the periphery, some responsible for mechanical and other for thermal nociception, and different fiber types that project these types of pain. What's interesting is that we here again have some of the same channels as for temperature, so it's actually a lot of the same ascending tracts responsible for pain and temperature sensation. But if we then go to the cortical level, you will actually see that there is quite different pathways for some of these painful sensations. So again, you have this incoming signals from the dorsal horn of the spinal cord going out to these tracts, going up to the primary somatosensory cortex. But if we look down here, you'll actually also see that there are some direct projections, not to the primary somatosensory cortex, but actually also to other cortical structures such as the insula and the anterior cingulate. So sometimes these are called the pain matrix. So it's several different regions of cortex which respond to painful sensations. So we have the anterior cingulate here, and we have the insula here, and they process to various degrees various types of painful sensations. But it's not only the primary somatosensory cortex which is responsible for pain sensation. Hearing is also an important sense for all of us humans. And of course we have to look at the ear, not surprisingly. And the part of the ear that is responsible for our sensation of hearing is the cochlea up here, which are these half-rounded shapes here responsible for hearing sensation. And the important part for hearing is actually this basilar membrane that you see here. So you have two channels, and the idea is that here, or any sound is of course sound waves. So this is air that's traveling And what you will see is that this basilar membrane gets compressed when air is flowing in, and then you will actually be able to see that along this half-rounded shape, this is just a stretched version of it, and it's approximately 3 centimeters long. Different parts along this tract here in the cochlea is responsible for responding to different frequencies. So whenever you hear a sound, you will have sound waves coming in with different frequencies. So, and this organ here is then able to detect frequencies of the sound waves from around 20 hertz. So that's sound waves traveling with 20 times a second. The frequency of 20 hertz up to 20,000 hertz. And you will see that it's in the furthest part away from this incoming hole where the sound waves can enter, that the high frequency or the low frequencies are detected, whereas it's closest here that the higher frequencies are detected. What then happens is that this basilar membrane gets compressed when these traveling waves go through this tract here, the cochlea, and there are these hair cells that then get pressed on. And when they get pressed on, they will actually send signals down here. So this is a bit difficult to see, but you have the membrane here, and then you have the hair cells here, which then enters the spiral ganglion cells in here, which are then responsible for processing the sounds at the different frequencies. So what you will have is that along this this axis in the cochlea, you will see that you have the lowest frequencies down in the furthest end, and you have the highest frequencies down here, and then we'll then send signals to the cochlear nucleus through the spiral ganglion cells, and different parts of the cochlear nucleus will then be responsible for processing different frequencies. So you have more detailed view on how the branching of all these neurons are in the cochlear nucleus. If we then look more carefully into the central processing, we have that the incoming signals comes to the ventral cochlear nucleus here. But because we have 2 ears, we will of course have signals coming in from both ears. And what happens is that you will have signals coming and meet each other in the superior olive here. And when signals they enter at the same time, you will then have 2 incoming signals which will make the neurons in the superior olive able to fire, which is then sort of a way to detect whether there is a coincidence detector, meaning that the signals come at the same time through the 2 ears, or when they actually arrive at the same time, and that's why we can then be able to distinguish also locations of where sounds are coming from, because we have these coincidence detectors in the superior olive, which is able to discriminate when did the 2 signals actually come compared to each other. And then the signals are sent through the up to the inferior colliculus, up at the brainstem, and then to the auditory cortices. And then in the primary auditory cortex, up here you have different domains actually physically located, which is beside each other, responsible for processing signals at the different frequencies. And then when you hear a sound, it will always be a composite of sound waves at different frequencies. So only when you hear one clear tone, it will only be one of these. But in principle, when you hear any sound and any thing, you will have sounds at different frequencies coming in, and then it's put together in the auditory